And staying with that story, Olympic Paralympic sprinter Oscar Pistorius should have been waking up this morning for the last time in a high-security prison in South Africa. But that's no longer the case following the decision by the country's Department of Justice to reject his parole application. Pistorius could face another 4 months in prison for the death of his girlfriend Reeva Steenkamp, while officials decide if he'll be released under house arrest. Speaking to NBC's Today's programme, Reeva Steenkamp, mother of Reeva, gave her reaction to the decision of South Africa's Justice Department.
The justice system is coming through for us now. I'm not worried about if it's a short delay. It's been set now, the President, for him to wait now until the time is right. And you know, we struggle in this country with respect for women, and I think they're giving justice now to Reeva. My daughter's life was taken. If she'd have lived longer, she could have done more. She would have definitely improved women's position in life, and that is what is important to me. All I want to say to him is what he's done to our lives, destroyed our lives, and taken away the most precious thing in our life, and taken away her future. There's massive pieces of the puzzle missing, and I don't think he will ever say anything about that. You have to forgive. You have to forgive. Otherwise, that poison will sit in your body and destroy you. So to move forward with things now that I have to do, it's better to use my good energy in the right place and try and save other women, instead of wondering what's going on with Oscar. It's nothing to do with me, what's going on with Oscar. I'm not really interested if he stays. I'm happy about this precedent now they've set, because it'll be good for other women in South Africa.
That was Reeva Steenkamp, the mother of Reeva Steenkamp, speaking to the Today programme. Well, I'm joined in the studio now by Barrister John Hurlock, who followed the Oscar Pistorius case in great detail. John, very warm welcome to you on This Day Live. A sense of relief in South Africa about the decision to keep him behind bars. Reeva Steenkamp there saying that the justice system now working for them. Are you surprised by the decision to keep him behind bars?
I am surprised by the decision, because technically he served 1/6 of his sentence, and applying the usual rules which apply in terms of early release prisoners, he should be entitled to be released after 10 months. The justification for the Minister putting back the decision is the fact that the decision was made prematurely, in that although the 10-month period is up, the decision to actually release him earlier was made before the 10-month period, and that's his justification for putting the decision back.
Do you think that if this is just to keep him in prison, it's keeping everybody happy, or is this just due process, that the whole discussion about keeping him behind bars or whether he would be released into house arrest should have actually just begun today, basically?
Well, that's what the Minister has said, that it was all premature and the decision was made before the 10-month period. I think in terms of timing, it wasn't the best time for Mr Pistorius to be released. I think it's Reeva Steenkamp's birthday yesterday. It's National Women's Week in South Africa. So those factors taken into consideration, timing-wise, it wasn't the best decision to release him at this time.
I mean, do you think that the justice system has bowed to pressure from people like the Progressive Women's Movement for South Africa? They're allied to the ANC. They've been putting a lot of pressure on the Justice Department to have his stay in prison extended. Do you think they would have bowed to that sort of pressure?
I think all the talking about the decision and people lobbying like that group probably were a factor in him coming to the decision to put matters back for apparently 4 weeks or maybe even 4 months.
Why do you think it's going to take that length of time? They seem to have sort of stated very clearly that this could take 4 months, and knowing South Africa, it may well take 4 months. But is there a particular reason why that length of time has been given to make this decision?
Well, cynics would say the reason why it's going to take about 4 months will be to tie it into the decision to hear the appeal, which is going to take place in November. Process takes about 2 weeks to 4 weeks usually, so for a decision by the parole board to take 4 months is surprising to me.
There were concerns within South Africa that he was getting special treatment. It's starting to emerge that that probably wasn't the case. Is this another example of making sure that he's not seen to be having special treatment?
No, he's definitely not receiving special treatment, because in relation to many prisoners who have early release, the decision in terms of when they should be released is made before the 1/6 period of time. So rather than him getting special treatment, some people would argue that the system's actually working against him and he's not getting a fair rub of the green in relation to general prisoners in the population.
I mean, prosecutors have filed this appeal against the judge's original judgment. Prosecutors arguing that Thokozile Masipa was actually mistaken in her application of the law and that another court could have come back with a different decision. Do you think that's valid, and how do you think that's going to be taken going forward?
Well, I've heard that recently she's actually accepted that any appeal isn't remote, which is a strange thing for a judge to say, bearing in mind the appeal is still outstanding. South African law, like most law, can't reverse a decision or consider an appeal on the basis of the facts of the case. So the only avenue open to them is to look at some problems in terms of the interpretation of the law. Now, the appeal which has been submitted by the prosecution turns on something called dolus eventualis, and that turns on what we would call recklessness in this country, but it's all to do with foresight of consequences. And the main hub of the prosecution appeal is that on the basis of what he knows about guns, his experience of guns and his experience of the situation, he should have foresaw that there could have been death as a result of shooting the bullets through the door.
But there was also Judge Masipa's interpretation of that very point, that somebody in that position still might not have understood that what was about to happen in that bathroom in South Africa might not have ended up in the death of Reeva Steenkamp or anybody else for that matter.
Just because you foresee a consequence doesn't mean that you intend for it to happen, and that's going to be the basis upon which I suspect the appeal will turn on.
Lawyers for Pistorius have got until 17th September to file a response to that appeal. What do you think is likely to happen next? Could we actually see this sort of coming to nothing, or do you envisage seeing a retrial or just a review of the facts from the first trial? Because let's face it, some of those defendants and prosecution witnesses weren't the finest.
No, they weren't. But in terms of what will happen if the appeal is successful, I don't envisage there being any form of retrial. I think it would be a substitute decision by another tribunal. And if they were of the opinion that he did have foresight of consequences and therefore did intend it, then he'd be convicted of murder. And this debate in relation to the 4-month period being put back would be academic, because the sentence for murder would be in the region of 15 years.
So they wouldn't have anything like sort of a double jeopardy type thing, because it was only a judge that rejected the murder charge. He was never actually tried on that charge.
Well, he was tried on the charge, but she found as a fact, applying the law, that he wasn't guilty of that offence. The appeal process isn't really a rehearing of the evidence. It's a consideration as to whether the law itself was properly applied. So if the prosecution is successful, there'll be no arguments in terms of double jeopardy. It would just be a substitute verdict.
Isn't this just open to interpretation? And there's a large element of that in the law. You could put this in front of different judges, you could have put it in front of a jury, and they would have come up with a different interpretation. Do you think this whole case should have actually been seen in front of a jury?
That's a good question. There's been problems in relation to South Africa over the years, historically, which has made trials by jury problematic. Things have moved on considerably from those days, and some people would argue that, bearing in mind the way in which South Africa is going now, maybe the best way to deal with matters like this would be with a jury trial.
John Hurlock, it's been great to have your insight on this case. For now, thank you very much.